What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Monday afternoon. We just heard from Mike Norvell, and he had a pretty long-ranged opening statement as we head into Stanford week, which with Florida State Seminoles will be facing them at 10:30 Eastern time for us. So it is going to be a pretty long Saturday night going into early Sunday morning. But still, nonetheless, we've got a handful of things to talk about. We've got some injury updates, including Deuce Robinson. We've also got some depth chart changes across the board. A Tommy Castellanos injury that we'll be keeping a close eye on throughout the rest of this week. And then also the main part of this video today is an honest conversation between us all three, as VZ's joined us for this Monday's afternoon episode to just kind of open up our own feelings, our own personal thoughts of, Mike Norvell and the things that, where the program is headed moving forward after we just saw Penn State make a big move there, firing James Franklin. So we'll jump into a deep conversation about that in just a minute. But let me introduce the gentleman. With me is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief at NoleGameday.com, and then Austin VZ, our lead basketball writer. Gentlemen, it is a pretty rough, another one of those pretty rough Mondays for FSU fans and anybody that have been committed to, Mike Norvell. It seems like things are starting to dwindle down of his army that were behind him, backing him.
Not a good stretch for Florida State, and we talked about it. I mean, going into that game against Pittsburgh, it was very important for Florida State not only to prevent another 3-game losing streak, which this is now the 6th time in Mike Norvell's tenure that Florida State has lost at least 3 games in a row. It's happened every year that he's been with FSU except for 2023, obviously. So, I mean, that's a tough one to add into the bank. But, I mean, this was a big game for Florida State to win, just about the, potential future for the Seminoles under Mike Norvell. And obviously, I don't think any of us expect FSU's administration maybe to make a move during the middle of the season. That'd probably be later on. But I mean, this to me, it kind of felt like the beginning of the end for Mike Norvell in Tallahassee.
Yeah, it's the first time where, we're always going to speculate. That speculation's always going to be there. But that Pitt loss was the first one to go, okay, things might need to change. Because I understand letting him keep going after a 2-10 season. We all know the reasons why that season happened, and you're willing to understand Alfred's bet on saying, hey, I'm willing to bet that that's the outlier and that 2023 isn't the outlier. But as we get further and further away from 2023, that's looking like the outlier, not 2024.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Florida State put a lot of that money into grabbing these, your assistants, your offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and Tony White and Gus Malzahn. And yeah, you've seen some great success there offensively for yourself. But then on the other side, on the defensive side, it's just been an absolute nightmare for you. And you just moved on from Adam Fuller. Off of some things that you did not like there. And you moved to Tony White, and you were expecting a lot better of a product. And we saw that early on. Let's just say, I don't care about talking about the 2 other games, but just Alabama to show you off in week 1. After that, though, it's been one of the worst performances I've seen as a defense of just, not understanding where you need to be. I don't think guys are quitting, but there's just so many damn missed assignments from all across the board. Dustin, we saw that on Saturday. I know we didn't get your thoughts on that game itself, so we'll let you have your time to do so, and then we'll jump into a little bit more on Mike Norvell and where this program's headed.
Yeah, it was just a total breakdown for Florida State defensively in that loss to Pittsburgh. And like you said, I mean, we really saw the potential, the ceiling of this defense in that victory over Alabama, where, I mean, I feel like they performed just about as well as they could in every facet of that game. But since then, you've obviously put your weaknesses on tape, and Virginia exposed Florida State in a big way a couple of weeks ago. And since then, I mean, we've seen Miami and obviously Pittsburgh, use some of the same things that Virginia put on film against FSU. And, the Seminoles haven't been able to adjust. They haven't been able to stop it. And to me, it's really, there's problems at every level of the defense. I mean, obviously, you have 5 sacks in this game against Pittsburgh, but it felt like the pass rush was few and far in between. Like, you would get those sacks and you would have a ton of plays where you wouldn't have any pressure at all. And then, hey, you might have some pressure, but you weren't getting to that quarterback and bringing them down. I mean, you had Blake Nicholson whiff on multiple sacks. Obviously, the play down there on the goal line where Deontay McCray isn't able to get Heinzel down, and then he gets by another defender and throws, that touchdown pass there. Some really killer moments where you're just not able to get home. The linebackers are having trouble defending over the middle of the field. I mean, Pittsburgh picked you apart there. The defensive backs, you're having poor tackling again in the secondary, not able to get guys down yards after catch. Pittsburgh had 10 passes of 15-plus yards in this game against Florida State. And remember, it was a true freshman quarterback on the road, second start of his career, and he came in and he looked like someone that had been playing for years. And, I mean, just diced up Florida State's defense and still can't defend the wheel route out of the backfield. It was another rough outing for Elijah Herring, and you really didn't see him much in that second half after Pittsburgh took advantage of him in the first half.
Yep. Linebacker corps, absolutely abysmal at the moment right now for FSU. And it's across all three levels for the most part. I think you're held there anchored by Darrell Jackson. He's going to take on a couple people, as we do know. But you got to have other people take advantage of the opportunities next to him, and that's just not the case. And you have zero pass rush. And I don't care. You have zero pass rush. It's awful. It's horrid. And that was something that we were deeply concerned with going into the season. Now, did they prove us wrong in that first week against Alabama? Absolutely, they did, just because they performed so well against what was a highly touted Alabama offensive line, as it always is year in, year out. But Florida State since then, though, has not been able to create a pass rush, and James Williams hasn't been able to get home there for you, and it just kind of seems like he plays patty cake at the line and just will go hit, and that's about it. There's no moves. There's no pass rush moves. There's nothing to kind of get around, backspin. There's no skill set to get back there to a quarterback. And then, like you said, Dustin, when you get there, when you have those opportunities, man, it is just missed tackle after missed tackle after missed tackle. And that has been an issue for years on years for Florida State. And so you can blame a defensive coordinator all you want. At the end of the day, there is still a head coach on this team, and that is Mike Norvell. And if you can't get it fixed with a pass coordinator, and you sure as hell ain't showing it right now, this is where things start to pile on D-Lou and VZ on, Mike Norvell and the future that it looks like for him in Tallahassee.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, with the defensive struggles, I point to Tony White's history. You look at what he's done the last couple of years, the 2 years he was at Syracuse, the 2 years he was at Nebraska. We talked about it. I mean, he fielded a top 25 defense. They were traditionally very good against the run, struggled some against the pass, didn't allow a ton of points in most games. And now, we've seen that totally turn on its head these last 3 games for Florida State. And we've got to remember, Tony White, he's implementing this new 3-3-5 defensive scheme. It's the first time at Florida State a lot of these defenders are working in that scheme. And, some of the guys who did have experience in that 3-3-5, they haven't played up to the standard that Florida State expected. You mentioned James Williams. Obviously, Jerry Wilson has had his struggles as well. And an experienced linebacker that had been playing in this defense for years, Stephon Thompson, now dealing with an injury, and he's going to be out of the lineup when Florida State travels to Stanford this weekend. And I think, you saw the guys play very well in that first game against Alabama, but now with the mistakes piling up, it just feels like there's a lot of hesitancy. Guys are questioning their assignments. They're getting out of position. I mean, we saw it. I can point out to one play in particular that keeps coming back to my mind on Saturday. You've got Pittsburgh down at their own goal line going the opposite way. It's a long drive for Pittsburgh. I think it's third down at this point. Florida State's rushing 4 or 5. Blake Nicholson's the quarterback spy. He just sits in his position. I mean, Heinzel's not going to be able to go anywhere. There's not a pass downfield, but he goes to the left for some reason, gets caught up in the bodies, and Heinzel just runs for the first down. I mean, so you just have guys who just aren't trusting their eyes or not trusting their assignment. So it's hard for me to put that all on Tony White. He did take a lot of the blame yesterday during FSU's press conference and said that he wants to simplify this defense a little bit moving forward and cut it down where guys aren't having to make so many decisions and can just kind of be aggressive and go get after it on the field. We'll see if maybe that can lead to some success against Stanford. But right now, I just don't know if Florida State has the personnel to run this defense, especially when they're not getting home with that pass rush, which has been a complete disappointment.
I was going to say a lot of the same things that you just mentioned about Tony White, because there's been so many people saying, hey, Florida State needs a new defensive coordinator already. He's been too good of a defensive coordinator for too long at different stops for me to think that he's the problem. Now, has there been some flirtation with the UCLA job? Maybe, and probably. But he's still a good defensive coordinator. This team just doesn't have defensive talent. They just don't. And especially in that linebacker room, they're running around like with their heads cut off. That's the best way to describe it. They don't have a pass rush, and that's where the lack of development and recruiting catches up with them. I think this defense can be good. The talent just isn't there for the way Tony White wants it and needs it to be for this kind of defense. As good as Darrell Jackson is most of the time, he just doesn't have someone that can win those one-on-one matchups beside him. And that's what you really need in that kind of situation. They just don't have that right now.
Yeah, those defensive transfers, you landed in the trenches. I mean, they're just looking like busts for Florida State at this point. You know, obviously not getting a ton from James Williams. DeMonte Diggs has been out for multiple weeks with an injury. You know, Deontay McCray had been kind of solid for Florida State recently, but that game against Pittsburgh, you know, he got exposed, especially on that one play on that passing down, which, you know, Tony White admitted was a mistake from his end. They rotated late on that play. Deontay McCray wasn't supposed to be out there in that situation. They were trying to get other guys on the field, but it was just too late to substitute. And that seemed like it led to a little bit of a heated moment between Mike Norvell and Terrence Knighton, which, you know, Tony White addressed yesterday, Mike Norvell talked about today. So, I mean, frustrations, you know, just starting to build not only among the players, but it seems like maybe some along the coaching staff as well.
Some irritation going on there on the sideline between the coaching staff, but it would do that to you whenever you have the defense playing the way that it is. And I'm sure it's extremely irritating for Tony White if he's trying to get these things put across to his players and such. I was trying to find that video that you guys were talking about because I remember seeing that all across my timeline yesterday of, you know, Blake Nicholson going off, number 20, going off to that left side of the Pittsburgh offensive line. And he should have been reading the quarterback, and did not exactly do so, my friends. And that's just been the case, though. I mean, Visa, you brought it up the last couple of games here on our instant reactions or during our live watch parties that, oh, well, Blake's firing. He's going, but not to the right spot.
Yeah, I can't discount his effort. His effort's just going the complete wrong way. Like it's pretty crazy to watch.
It's rough. It's definitely rough. What stood out to you, you know, offensively? I'll go over to the offensive side of the ball, Dustin. In this game, we saw Gavin Sawchuk running very hard. We saw Usman Kroman, Keziah Holmes finding the end zone, but a big time issue right now is holding on to the ball. Running backs are losing the ball on a consistent basis right now for Florida State, and it is hurting them in a very large way. We heard from Mike Norvell today about this. He was asked about it earlier this morning, and coach speak. It's not even really coach speak. It's kind of just Mike Norvell's speech where you're just kind of suppressing what you probably should be saying. So practically he was saying that, you know, if you're out there and you make those mistakes, there'll be some kind of thing that Florida State will have to enhance their abilities to improve that running back room to make sure those things just do not happen. Why don't you just say you're not going to play the goddamn football game? You're going to be taken out of the game and you're not going to play if you fumble the football. How about that? How about you work that way? How about you just say it clear and out front, because he did not say it anywhere close to that. If you keep fumbling the ball, you will not play in the football game. That's all you got to say, Mike. That's all you got to say. Don't suppress it so much, man. It's incredible the ways that he can, no bad language, but he can just kind of foot around things of just not like, just say it straightforward. It's football. It's not tennis. Shout out to my tennis people. It's football. These guys, they're young men. They can deal with it. If you keep fumbling the ball, you're not going to play. You're not going to be out on the football field. That's exactly what Mike should be saying, but didn't even get anywhere close to that whatsoever. But that's kind of the case, though, because Mike Norvell will still put players out there that continue that show you mistakes week after week after week.
I'm going to say 3 a lot. 3 games, 3 different running backs, 3 fumbles, lost all 3 of them. You know, and this, we're seeing it's a consistent issue. It's not just one guy that's losing the ball. And when it's this many running backs who are having trouble holding on to it, it leads me to believe that this is more of a coaching issue more than anything for Florida State. And, you know, you can't really say it in too many words. It's something that has to be changed. I mean, they keep committing these turnovers in crucial situations. Obviously, that one came at around midfield for Florida State. Then Pittsburgh's able to go down there and I believe tie the game up off of it in that second half, and then, you know, eventually go on to defeat Florida State in the second half. But really, I mean, the offensive problems for me in this game, they all come down to the injuries for Florida State. And I hate that to be the excuse, but you're missing your starting right tackle. Obviously, Squirrel White, Javon Boggs are out going into this game. Randy Pittman Jr. is ruled out in pregame warmups. At running back, you're deep there, but you are without Roydale Williams and and Cam Davis going into this game. And then late in the first half, Deuce Robinson suffers that injury, seemed to be a potential concussion, and he's not able to return. And then after that, I mean, you saw it in the second half. They really bogged down there just trying to mostly run the football. And then when they did try to put the ball in the air, Tommy Castellanos just didn't look comfortable with the personnel out there. I mean, really force-feeding Mekhi Danzy in this game. You go 16 out of 23, 245 yards, but 7 catches and 133 of those yards go to Mekhi Danzy. So the ball wasn't really spread around, and it was kind of hard to do that when, you're relying on some guys who really haven't gotten a ton of reps. And you point to LaWayne McCoy. This was a guy who missed a bunch of time in the spring and in the preseason, didn't really have a lot of chances to develop a rapport with Castellanos in practice. And you had Elijah Moore out there in the first half after Deuce Robinson's injury. There was a major miscommunication there where Tommy threw outside, Moore cut inside. And after that, I don't think we saw him on the field the rest of the game. You were relying on true freshman Tariq Mallory, who, I mean, just got to FSU in June. So you were really going deep into your personnel in this game at wide receiver and at tight end, and just wasn't enough for Florida State in that second half. You're able to put up those 21 points in the first 2 quarters, and then after that, I mean, just 10 points in that second half for Florida State. And that final touchdown, you got to remember, it didn't come until there were less than 2 minutes on the clock in the fourth quarter.
I was about to say, I only count 3 points being scored in the second half. Because that touchdown was basically just a heave by Tommy, and luckily Danzy's faster than literally anybody in the country and went and got it. So they didn't show that the rest of that second half, and that was the frustrating part for me was, that one drive where Holmes fumbled, they didn't even attempt to pass that drive. It was like 10 plays, all runs. At some point, you at least have to show a play action or something just to get the defense from collapsing on that box. I don't know why Holmes was getting the ball anyways. Why he got more carries than Chroma, I don't understand. To me, the only 2 backs that should be getting carries at this point are Chroma and Gavin Sawchuk. Those are clearly the best running backs in the room at this point in time. Why are we giving anyone else the football, much less 10 times? Those wide receiver issues and injuries absolutely hurt the team. There's no sugarcoating that, but it also doesn't excuse losing to Pitt.
No. And I think it just points to deeper issues for Florida State and, about recruiting and about development. You don't have anyone in there to help you out at wide receiver or, really at offensive line. You're relying on 5 transfers anyway, and the guy who you put in to replace one of your transfers is another transfer. I mean, there's no development there for Florida State, and it's showing at crucial positions. You can point to the defensive line as well, the linebackers. Blake Nicholson's a guy in year 3, and he's shown some progress, but not enough of a guy who now you're expecting to be an upperclassman and someone who's very important on that defense. And you can pick and point at multiple things across the roster, but I think it all goes back to Florida State hasn't recruited well enough. Obviously, Pittsburgh hasn't recruited as well as Florida State. So I mean, it really comes down to recruiting, but then you have to maximize the talent and the in-game coaching that you have. And Florida State, I mean, in all facets of this game, they were outclassed by Pittsburgh, plain and simple.
That shouldn't be the case. I mean, that should not ever, 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 ever be the case that Pittsburgh is doing this to you at home with, as we started the show, freshman quarterback. Woohoo! Yippee! I mean, that is ridiculous. I mean, he was making plays all over the place, and yes, he had some mistakes as a rookie. He was, but still, he was able to respond, capitalize, and sure enough, he was able to dice up that defense that a lot of teams are able to do very easily on a week-to-week basis at this point in time. But yeah, the linebacker room. I mean, Elijah Herring has been a big disappointment, man. I thought I was very, very, very high on him coming into this team. I think all of us here on the show thought he would be a good veteran guy in there to lead the room and such, but right now he can't lead because he can't put himself in the right positions to make any kind of plays for you, and he's putting himself out of directions, and like we've been seeing, Dustin, I mean, just waiting for things to come to him. And as a linebacker, you can't do that. Yes, you need to use your eyes and see, what's going on in the backfield and such, but a lot of just wait and see, and that's something that has just been that's been the theme for I don't know how long in Florida State's linebacker room, right, VZ? We talked about in the instant reaction. That's just been the case in the linebacker room for Florida State for feels like a decade. It might be. What are we at? 2025? Yeah, we're getting near that range.
It's been since Telvin left. Like
Yeah,
Terrence
so
Smith was fine after that. Reggie was okay, but really since Talvin left, that room's been a mess.
And then, the thing is, I really like this linebacker room coming into the season. And
Same.
yeah, I think we all kind of did. And we were like, this could be one of the deeper linebacker rooms for Florida State in years with those 5 guys that they had at the top. And then, Caleb Lavallee potentially getting back into the fold at some point during the middle of the 2025 season. But they just dropped off in a big way these past 3 games and in all phases. And I think the glaring thing is they're just hesitating now. They're not as confident as they were before for whatever reason, and that's plaguing FSU because they're not reading the plays anymore, and we're seeing it with the wheels. I mean, these last 2 games, Florida State's getting wheeled to death, and it's like they didn't even expect Pittsburgh's running back Desmond Reed to be on the field on Saturday. Guy ends up with 155 receiving yards, not rushing yards, receiving yards.
While still playing through injury. Like he left the game multiple times and then came back in and still torched the linebacker room.
No prep for that one. I'm glad you said that because that's how it felt about going into halftime. I was like, hey, did they have any idea that number 0 was going to be playing in this game? Holy smokes. Oh, God.
So between that and the inability to now fill in on run gaps, we're seeing a lot more explosive plays allowed by the Seminoles in the running game. And then now, with this quarterback at least, an inability to spy. And when you are in position to spy, for some reason, you get too aggressive and decide to fill, and the quarterback's able to slide out there. This defense, they got to do a lot of soul searching this week. And I think last week, we were mainly harping about the defensive backfield, but now it's all 3 levels where you're having some major breakdowns, things that need to fix. And, we saw a lot of changes on the depth chart. We'll get into that. You're going to have a long flight over there to Stanford. You're going to have a lot of time on that plane to work through your issues, and hey, hopefully they'll come out with a better effort on Saturday night.
Yeah. Here's a great comment here from Newbie on YouTube saying, I would give my life savings for just one Nigel Bradham on this team. I think you and a lot of this fan base would do the same. Just look on just what you can do to yourselves at least. You go to Sundays and you have NFL. You can watch guys like Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, Derwin James, who just had a game-sealing interception this weekend. Jalen Ramsey, who had 2 sacks for my squad over there in Pittsburgh. Ryan Fitzgerald getting a game-winning field goal against the Cowboys. Shout out to my boy Ryan Fitzgerald, man, getting that game winner. So at least you got some Noles in the pros to look forward to on Sundays, but it don't matter. I mean, the thing is, it comes down to Saturdays and what Florida State's going to do this upcoming weekend against Stanford. And I never thought that I would think that this would be a football game. And I hate to say it, but it just might. It just might. And that should never be the case on a Florida State podcast with 3 goobers talking about the Seminoles. We should never have to say that it might be a game against Stanford.
I mean, to be different feels like 2011 Stanford, but in 2025, shouldn't be a thing.
Absolutely not. They just got a big time donation from someone there. It's too late. You have no excuses, though. FSU, the donation. I don't know when that's going to hit the wire, but that you can't make any changes here in this next couple of days before the game on Saturday. So just wait, though. Watch out for Stanford the next couple of years. They got a lot of resources. They got Andrew Luck there as their general manager. But unless I don't know, I just did not think at all that I would think this is a football game.
That's where we're at.
Undefeated at home, right? Stanford is this season.
Yep.
Well. That's looking at it the wrong way. Look at who they played and look at how they played. It has not been pretty.
2-0 at home.
Okay.
I know, VZ. I know.
Stanford's got something Florida State doesn't, and that's an ACC win, unfortunately.
That is tough, VZ. That's a tough one.
It is,
but
it's
tough to hear.
I wish we could play Boston College this year.
That would be fun. I'm sure Tommy certainly would. That's for sure. But yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of things that, the same thing over and over again. I mean, I kind of went on my rant there about Mike and what he says in pressers, and I'm fully over that. I can't get a clear answer from him, and I don't think he really wants to hold players accountable verbally. That's never been his thing, and that's fine. He can ride on that all he wants, but that's just not working in your favor with what you're doing right now, and it hasn't worked for well over a year as a Seminoles. How many days will it be until Florida State? Like how many what was that, 380 something days.
Well, it's 385 on Saturday, so Saturday with 392.
Okay, so that's just ridiculous. Dustin, what's your thoughts there? What's your thoughts on the not being able to get a win against an ACC team? This is your conference. And you have as much resources. If you're competing with Miami, Clemson, those are your other two that have the most resources in the conference. But at the end of the day, it is Florida State as well. And from what we've heard and things internally inside the program, there is a lot of resources being pumped into this program as we speak. And we see the football-only facility being built. We see all these kind of enhancements and resources going into NIL and structure there. But you're 0-8 in your last ACC games, D-Lo. That's a fireable offense. You're donut and 8 in the ACC. That is a fireable offense, ladies and gentlemen.
It's really hard to fathom, because
Florida State.
Yeah, because Florida State,
losing to Duke.
You're playing in the ACC. It's obviously not the cream of the crop of the competition. There are some good teams in the conference, but we get on the show and we talk about Billy Napier's struggles at Florida. Well, they're playing a top 5, top 10 team just about every week. And you point back to that schedule they had last year where, they're able to finish 7-5. It was a pretty impressive run for the Gators. And so far this year, they're playing a tough schedule over there. And Penn State just fired James Franklin. Big Ten's got a lot tougher competition over there than the ACC. Florida State should be the cream of the crop in this conference. And, just hasn't been the case for the last decade, ever since Jimbo Fisher went out the door and you switch over to Willie Taggart and then now the Mike Norvell era, you've had some glimpses of success, but not even close to the standard of what this program established, back in the day, which has quickly become an even further back in the day for Florida State. But yeah, this 8-game losing streak to conference opponents, it's a program record for FSU, not in a good way. And, I was actually going to get into that before you brought it up, but this game against Stanford, it's important to snap this conference losing streak for Florida State and finally beat an ACC team. Mike Norvell's got a better record against SEC opponents than ACC at this point. It's kind of wild.
I think the crazier part is Florida State's last ACC win was against Fernando Mendoza and Cal, and Mendoza's going to be a first-round pick in a few months. That's the crazier part to me. I get losing some of these games. How'd they not lose that one? It's a little crazy, but yeah, Stanford's a must win, especially with the bye week coming after that. If you lose that, that's a lot of time for administration to make a decision.
Yeah, it's a long flight back. Might be having a separate flight on the way home. No, that's that's over then. That's wraps. That would do it for you. And I think I don't think they weren't going to do anything after Pittsburgh, and there's so much money that has to go into this and the buyout and such like that. But you lose to Stanford, they have no choice. Gun to their head, the administration, boosters, everybody. They won't. There already won't be much people in Campbell State in these next 2 home games. But nonetheless, you won't see any kind of support for Mike Norvell for how many he does still have left behind him because, this is now you can't go donut and 9 in the ACC. You just can't. And I hate that. We can't forget, nobody's going to figure out what last season, what happened last year. Those were ACC games. Those were you were supposed to win those. You're supposed to beat Duke. Shocker.
What about Memphis?
You've got to win those games, and you went 2-10 last year, and you're on an awful streak right now once again.
And that's really why it's hard for me to see Mike Norvell coming back from this one because, obviously the fans, they had a little bit of patience early on and kind of listened to the message. And, you had to go through COVID-19 and all the restrictions and stuff that kind of put on recruiting and made it tough to go out there and evaluate guys in person. So, they kind of went through with it. Obviously 2022, you start to see that progress. You get the 10 wins, did have a 3-game losing streak that season. Then you go into 2023, and you reach the pinnacle of probably what this program could become under Mike Norvell. Unfortunately, don't get to go to the playoff, obviously. And since then, it's just come crashing down. You had the 2-10 season. They made the changes. And I think, with the success early on, it kind of felt like the pressure was being alleviated off Mike Norvell's shoulders a little bit. But now with this 3-game losing streak, it just all comes crashing down. All of that goodwill that you had from that Alabama win, I mean, doesn't really matter at this point for Florida State, with the perception of everything that it's just not going to get better under Mike Norvell at Florida State. And now fans, I mean, they're just, when you get into another stretch like this, you can only think back to how you felt last year during that 2-10 2024 season. And it's like, it's every single year at this point. It hasn't changed. Will it ever change? I'm not sure.
I don't know. That's the thing. You go up for a ride, you go back down. Go up for a ride, you go back down. Now you're going down, and you're going down and down. My stock is not looking good right now. Stock is not looking great.
What's the climb mean, Austin? You kind of said it doesn't always have to mean going one direction.
Yeah, I tweeted it. I tweeted the other day. Did we ever consider that the climb could also be climbing down? Like,
eventually you do have to climb back down, right? You can't keep climbing. Like, there's of course a limit there. Maybe Mike hit that limit of how far he could possibly climb. I just didn't think the college football playoff snub would hit them that hard. If that's the like excuse or whatever it is, I didn't think that would really mentally destroy Mike Norvell. Like, if that's what it was, that really just killed it off for him. I didn't think that would really happen. I think for the fan base, it definitely sucked for a good bit of time. Sucks. Blue is what it is. It's Florida State, got all the resources. Let's respond and let's go get after it in 2024 and get our revenge, I guess you can say. No, you don't do that. You lose to an ACC team in Georgia Tech.
That first drive, though.
That first drive was
awesome. We'll always have the first drive.
The revenge, Mike Norvell. I remember tweeting. I remember tweeting Mike Norvell is getting his revenge, going for number 2 there. What was that? Morlock who caught? No, that wasn't Morlock. Who caught that?
I said Morlock didn't catch anything.
No, yeah.
I think it was Courtney.
I think it was Courtney. Yeah, I think it was Brian Courtney there. And that going for 2, getting 8 points. Man, Mike Norvell is pissed off at ESPN and the College Football Playoff Committee. No, maybe not. Maybe no. No. And that's what concerns me too. If you're really leaning on like last year that killed you so badly, then that shouldn't be the case for a head coach at this level. At where maybe back where he was previously, that can work at a G5 level. Not at Power 4, not at Florida State. That you can't do that. You got to move on. It's on to next year. F that. You go and you take care of business. What you need to do. That's just how it is at Florida State, and that's how it should always be. But I just hate that. It's ridiculous to me. All right, let's move over here real quick. Let's move forward with another injury update on Deuce Robinson. Mike Norvell just practically said, to try to translate this for you guys, that he is maybe playing Saturday. He's maybe playing Saturday. He got taken out of the game, as we do know. To me, it looked almost like a hyperextension whenever I was watching on the TV screen, and then we don't see him come back out. Dustin, you didn't see him come back out onto the field in the second half there, which is certainly concerning. But Mike Norvell did say that he was a participant and was there during yesterday's practice, but those are always usually walkthroughs and such. So, you can't take too much away from that. But Florida State desperately needs their star wide receiver for this upcoming Saturday night, or things could get really interesting just going off of what we saw with Tommy and, trying to find anybody in the wide receiver room, because, Squirrel White has also been can't play for more than maybe 2 quarters a game.
Yeah, it's been tough.
Yeah.
Tough injury issues for FSU. And I mean, I honestly couldn't tell exactly what happened to Deuce. I was watching pretty closely after he went down there and whenever they escorted him back to the sideline. And it didn't really to me look like they were evaluating him like for an upper, like a arm or shoulder or like a lower body type of injury. It seemed more of maybe a concussion type of thing, but obviously that's not something that we're going to get specifics from Mike Norvell. And, we saw a potential concussion hold Micah Pettis out of this last game against Pittsburgh. So it'll be something to monitor throughout the week. I mean, I kind of talked about it earlier in the show, but once you had Deuce out along with everybody else that Florida State's missing as far as skill players, It was tough going for that offense. They were afraid to put the ball in the air a little bit, and even on the plays where it was passing downs, you saw some hesitancy from Tommy Castellanos out there, and I think that just comes to him not really having a lot of chemistry with the personnel. I mentioned the issues, well, not the issues, but Lawayne McCoy not being available in the spring and the preseason, and maybe not having a bunch of chemistry there like you do with Deuce and Squirrel, and even Javon Boggs, who Gus Malzahn was someone that was kind of a security blanket for Tommy during the spring and preseason. Then same thing with Landon Thomas. He was banged up for a lot of fall camp and didn't get a ton of reps out there. And then now he's working his way back into the lineup, and he's forced into a big role with with Randy Pittman not available. So you're relying on Landon and Marquiston to get most of the snaps there at tight end. So you just got to hope that these guys can be available on Saturday night. That's what it comes down to, health at this point for this Florida State offense, because they have produced well enough, especially in the games against Virginia and against Pittsburgh, to win. But ultimately, they were let down by the defense. I think any game where Florida State's offense puts up 31-plus points on the board, it should be a victory for the Seminoles.
Yeah, but this is a fake 31. This was a very fake 31, just like the Miami game was a fake 22.
I didn't mention that.
I'm just saying, those are fake scores. Those are not real scores. We can't add late scores where they completely changed how they were playing the first 50 minutes of the game, 55 minutes of the game, basically. I still don't know. I've mentioned this Saturday in the Interaction podcast. Why are we running wide receiver screens to Deuce Robinson? Should just not happen. He's too big of a target to be doing that.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense right there. It's almost too much of a risk. Why? He's way too tall for that kind of mess. But they don't know. I don't think they have reliability on others in that room to maybe run those screens, or they don't.
Or here's an idea: just stop running them in general, because they've never worked at Florida State. They just haven't. We got so sick of them last year.
You'll see it again Saturday night, Easy. Get ready.
But if you are going to run it, know your personnel.
Yeah.
That's a Lawayne McCoy. That's a Makai Danzy type of play right there.
Yeah.
Deuce is your blocker.
Jalen Lucas.
Jalen Lucas would be perfect for that.
Lucas, maybe, because he's not getting reps at running back. He was getting reps out there in the slot on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe try that instead of your 6'7" wide receiver there, where that doesn't make any sense there whatsoever. In my opinion, that's been some questionable things from Gus Malzahn so far the last couple of weeks as well. But too, now we keep an eye on what Tommy Castellanos, when he's dinged up like this, you can certainly tell that he's not been his way since really that Alabama game, I must say, just with how he was running and feeling a little bit more free, I would say, because he does run with that, and hasn't been that case, a little bit more safe and taking slides and sliding before contact and such, which is good for the most part. But there's some times though where you'll see in the flats, I believe it was, I want to say Marquiston Douglas, that was at the second level, and that he could have easily grabbed there for a first down on third down, but didn't do that, and then kind of just holds onto the ball and then goes and slides. And that's kind of been the issue with Tommy at the moment, where Gus Malzahn's, I guess, having to limit him a little bit with how he's using his legs because of the injury, but it's just starting to become just a screwball for them right now offensively in that situation.
Seems like the hits are starting to add up a little bit for Tommy, and this was kind of the problem at Boston College a little bit last year. He got banged up, and, he obviously didn't fit into that system like he does this Florida State offense. But after that, his effectiveness on the ground just wasn't as good. And that's how it's been the last couple of weeks, ever since he got dinged up in that victory against Kent State. Obviously Florida State releasing these availability reports for the last 3 conference games, and he's been listed as probable for every one. And sounds like he suffered another injury on Saturday in this win against Pittsburgh. Gus Malzahn speaking to the media on Sunday and said that Tommy was injured on the very first offensive play of the game. Said the first drive, Tommy ended up getting banged up. The first play, he showed a lot of toughness the rest of the game, and he has done that all year. Tommy is such a tough guy. He's been playing. He hasn't been 100%. I think everybody knows that. We've had to be very smart with him in practice and all that, and he gets hurt the very first play of the game. He's a tough guy, and he battles. He's a great competitor, so it's tough, but that's part of playing quarterback. And actually, Castellanos was asked about, his health following the loss to Pittsburgh, and as we know, I mean, he's not really a guy to make excuses. You know, he said, I'm good, obviously, from fall camp to now. You're never going to be 100%. It's just football. I'm good enough to do whatever that I need to do to win, to do for the team. I'm a quarterback. I'm focused on playing quarterback and getting the ball to my guys. And that was in response to, you know, him running a little bit less. And is that something that defenses are forcing him to do? Is it because, you know, of his health? And you know, he responded that way. But I mean, it's clear, you know, he hasn't been the same quarterback that he was at the beginning of the season. And as we all know, I mean, Tommy isn't the biggest guy on the football field, just 5'9", around 200 pounds or so. So these hits and some of the plays, the physical plays, I mean, it's football out there at the end of the day. It's a collision sport. And he's done his part to try and protect his body, but he's also taken some unfortunate hits. And as we all know, I mean, injuries they're just part of the sport. They can just happen at random times. And Florida State, I mean, they're trying to be smart with him and get him back to as close to full strength as he can. But when he's not able to have that same dynamic ability like we saw on August 30th, it definitely hinders Florida State's offensive approach.
Another one, too, which is going to be important to keep an eye out for, is Micah Pettis, who we did not see play in that game against Pittsburgh. And I don't, you know, there wasn't any comment on him today in the presser, but we'll hear from Mike Norvell on Wednesday, and hopefully we'll get an update there, because that would be a big upgrade in the offensive line department for Florida State, and probably would make Tommy feel a little bit more comfortable in that pocket, get one of his top offensive linemen back. So we'll see if we get an update there on Pettis, because they'd love to have him on. Was he dressed? Did you spot him on the sideline, D-Lou?
I personally did not see him on the sideline.
Not at all. Okay.
I was looking around for him.
Were you? Okay. Interesting there. It's not a phenomenal sign. That means that he wasn't even, you know, not even there, but even, you know, dressed up, where we've seen a few guys go out there, see if they can go, like Randy Pittman. You know, he also wasn't available in the game as well. Did not get an update from Mike Norvell today on Pittman. So, you know, that's the thing. You know, he was out there trying. I actually saw him. The TV broadcast showed Randy Pittman. He was out there warming up, trying to do as much as he could, but you could see him leaving, going into the tunnel, limping and such. So he's still dealing with that injury. So those are two big players for you offensively that you would like to have back, because it would certainly be very concerning if Tommy is already dealing with his injury, but you're without your right tackle, your starting right tackle, and then you got Randy Pittman, who is your most versatile player on the offensive side of the ball for you, and then you out without Deuce Robinson. This is a big-time injury concern at the moment offensively for Florida State, which has carried this team into staying in games, I guess, because your defense hasn't been able to do anything to teams offensively right now. Things to keep a very, very close eye on. So our Wednesday show, hopefully we'll have some updates for you guys. Wait, the Wednesday injury, no, that we won't get it.
No, Thursday.
Yeah.
And guess what? Thursday. It comes out at 11 p.m.
The injury report will come out at 11 o'clock for Florida State.
Yeah, you can cover that one.
Stanford. You'll be up, Easy. You'll be up.
I may be up, but I might not be functioning. There's a difference.
Oh, yeah. You stop functioning around 10:30, 11.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you're playing in Pacific time this weekend.
Yeah. This is great stuff. Anyways, let's move on to the depth chart to finish this off. We don't need to go through every single thing here. I mean, there's just mainly a lot of changes here on the defensive side of the ball. I saw defensive end, true freshman Daryl Desir and sophomore Amari Williams are now co-starters with James Williams. It was pretty interesting, D-Lo. Did you
pull the graphic up?
Yeah. Did you spot where James Williams was a starter for you against Pittsburgh? You see that? After he was not the starter in the previous game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that, but before the end of that first drive, I mean, you once again saw Florida State go into the youth movement. Both the Desir twins out there, same thing with Amari Williams very early in that game. So I think, you know, they're trying to do anything they can to spark some type of life in that pass rush. It's not happening very consistently now. I mean, the plays where you are getting home, you're having to bring 5, 6, 7 defenders. Like when Florida State's just rushing 3 or 4 against passing situations, they're not really doing much for the most part. So if you have to go youth movement to get guys out there on the field who are a little bit more athletic, have some more burst than maybe some of those other veterans on the defense, you got to do what you got to do at this point. And, I think I said it last week. I personally would love to see the Desir twins, Amari Williams, Kevin Wynn. I mean, just ramping up their snap counts here, because those are all guys very young in their careers who have a lot of potential, have time to grow, and you invest in that now when you're not getting anything else from the veterans anyway. That's only going to pay off for you as time goes on.
And we've seen the freshmen contribute, like not just there, but Shamar Arnu got a lot of meaningful snaps against Pitt and was useful. We've already talked about Chroma and how good he is. This is a good true freshman class, the best Florida State's had in a long time. They're worth playing at this point. They just are, because they're trying and they're providing good statistical output when they're out there on the field.
Mm-hmm. So Kevin Wynn is now the primary backup to redshirt senior Daryl Jackson Jr. as we continue to see 55 out there more. Also, redshirt sophomore KJ Sampson is no longer on this depth chart. I don't think there's too much of a shock there. Redshirt juniors Deontay McCray and Jason Jenkins are co-starters there off the edge, and your back at defensive end, Jaden Jones, is now listed as your pure backup, who is your redshirt senior there, who's been around with the program for a while, and the staff talked very highly of him during this offseason and making strides. And Tony White talked very heavily and high on him as well, but just, trying to find any kind of pass rush available for you. And we'll see if maybe Amari Williams or some of these Desir twins can do that for you. Definitely see more pressure, or at least more, I don't know, just see more of wanting to do something from some of those younger guys there as well. And then when you jump over to the linebacker room, Stephon Thompson no longer on this depth chart due to the injury that, Mike Norvell told us he will not be playing this upcoming weekend. So redshirt junior Omar Graham Jr. and redshirt sophomore Caleb Lavale are now co-starters there. It'll be very intriguing to see how much we'll see of Caleb Lavale. I feel like this might be a game where we'll see him get some playing time in this game. Suffered an injury in the spring that held him out of spring camp and fall camp as well, but closer and closer and closer to probably getting out onto the field for Florida State and that linebacker room, because, right now anything new to try would be certainly appealing, I feel like, for all of us. The linebacker room.
I don't know, because,
you're about to go out there, D'Lo. You keep trimming up weight and everything. We're taking you away from the defensive line, and we're putting you at linebacker, bud. Hopefully you're getting some sprints in.
Not currently, but whenever Lavale transferred to Florida State, that was something that we talked about, as he was a guy who still had room to grow, didn't play necessarily a ton at North Carolina, and it was going to be an important offseason for him to get used to this new defensive scheme. And unfortunately, he was injured pretty early on there in spring practice, missed all of spring, missed all of the preseason. Sounds like he's just been able to get back onto the practice field and been able to get some work in just these last couple of weeks. I think his first appearance on the depth chart was ahead of that game against Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. So, even with him being inserted into this linebacker core potentially on Saturday, I don't know if that necessarily means some type of instant upgrade for Florida State's play on the field.
Mm-hmm. And then going over to the defensive backs room, a handful of changes here. FSU made changes at all 5 positions in the secondary. Redshirt freshman Kai Bates and Charles Lester III are now back up to redshirt sophomore Jabril Rawls, who Jabril is someone that
bright spot.
Yeah, if you're going to find a bright spot there on that defense, that would be Jabril Rawls, number 11. That man plays with a lot of physicality. He's been good at the line. He's been able to create takeaways for you. Shout out to Jabril Rawls. What a season he's had so far for the Seminoles. Now,
dare I say, he's been the best run support corner Florida State's had since Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, he knows what he reads it very well, and then once he reads it, he goes. It's all gas, no brakes for that young man. So shout out to him for having a nice start to this season. And then true freshman Shamar Arnu is now back up to senior Jerry Wilson, which Jerry Wilson has had a big-time struggle here for Florida State all across the board, and not only just coverage, but also to missed tackles. And I don't know what it is, but just if we're talking about waiting for things to come to you, that is the definition of how Jerry Wilson is playing right now. That when he's got to go make a tackle, it's just kind of just wait, and then okay, maybe I'll get it. Maybe wait for the other defender to get there before he has to clean up the tackle. But that's something that Jerry Wilson has to clean up, or we're going to see some more of these youngsters jump in. But Shamar Arnu is now right up there behind him of Jerry Wilson. Edwin Joseph remains as a starter there. And then redshirt freshman Ricky Knight III now backs him up after moving from cornerback. handful of things just being changed across the board there in the defensive back room. And then moving over to offense and special teams, Tayshawn Gelsey, a true freshman there at the wide receiver room. He's joining the two deep for the first time, co-backing up with Javon Boggs behind LaWayne McCoy. And then at the punt return position, LaWayne McCoy has now been added with Squirrel White as the co-starter there. I'm sure just because you don't know if Squirrel White is going to play. That's kind of how it will be probably for the rest of the season as a co-starter there, I would imagine, because you don't know if Squirrel White can stay healthy enough for you there. But Tayshawn Gelsey getting in there in the wide receiver room just because you have to, with all these different injuries that you're dealing with. They're starting to pile on there for Florida State.
Yeah, I mean, you've got eight wide receivers listed at those three positions on the depth chart, and Robinson missed the second half. Blackwell was out, Squirrel was out, and Boggs was out. So, I mean, half those guys you have listed didn't even, started, but didn't play the second half. So, I mean, you were just missing a ton of guys in that room. And like you said, Logan, who knows if they'll be available on Saturday. We'll just have to see how things progress throughout the week. I will say, at least on your point of Jerry Wilson, I thought he played better against Pittsburgh and was a little bit more physical in that game. Did have at least one play where he came up and filled in against the run and showed some good physicality. So, we'll see if maybe that leads to him to bounce back. Because one thing, I mean, we do know about Jerry Wilson, he's had these struggles, but this is a guy who really dedicates himself on and off the field. And we talked about it back in fall camp, that he was getting to the facility every day at 5 a.m. and going in, getting treatment, watching tape. So, I mean, it does seem like he's a guy who does the little things right. And you've got to hope that him just continuing to stay on his process will help him bounce back on the field.
That's great. That's great. He's got all those things going on. I didn't think he had the best game for himself, but
I think it was the best game, but I thought it was better than Virginia and Miami.
It wasn't the Miami game.
It wasn't that. Well, that's the thing. Like, it was already pretty low there, and we're trying to find some things here. Got to do better. That's a senior. That's when your top transfers come in. Got to play better. Anything else here? There's a question about the coach. Shout out to Jadon Nadal. I actually did an interview with him a long time ago. But asking here about honest thoughts on the coaching, if you can answer. I know we talked about it earlier in the show, but any honest thoughts real quick before we wrap up on the coaching? Do you want to grade the coaching?
No, I do not.
No, we'll stay away from doing that.
It's not good enough.
No, it's not. That's not great. It's not great.
It's not good enough on any phase of the game for Florida State. And I was talking about in the show, I know Florida State was very limited by injuries on offense, and this loss to Pittsburgh in particular, but just felt like the play calling was very vanilla. And you're trying some of the same things that earlier in the season, might have led to big plays, but now, just like on defense, where you've had your issues scouted out on tape by other opponents, it's the same thing for the offense. You continue to try that jet sweep. Miami absolutely was all over it last week, and then Pittsburgh, might have blown it up even worse on Saturday. That's just not a play that's going to work for Florida State anymore, because teams know that you're going to try and pull that out of your bag. So if you are going to run something like that, it's got to be flipped into a different type of play where you're not running that jet sweep to Mekhi Danzy. Maybe you're faking the jet sweep and then doing something else, which we did see Florida State try and do earlier in the season, but for some reason just hasn't worked these last two games. So, I do think that you're probably going to have to expand the playbook a little bit on offense and try some other things out to create success that maybe you haven't done to this point. And then on defense, I point back again. I just don't know if the personnel fits what Florida State and Tony White want to do with this 3-3-5. I don't know if they have the guys that they need to have. And, that's just the reality of life when you have a new defensive coordinator coming in here and your head coaches year 6. Tony White, he hasn't had enough time to get his guys in the scheme, and the guys that he did bring, just haven't performed up to par so far, like James Williams and Jerry Wilson, like we've talked about at length throughout the show. And at the end of the day, with how things are going for Florida State, I don't know if Tony White will have enough time to get all of his guys in the building on this defense like he wants to do. And then over to special teams. You had a punt blocked in this game by Pittsburgh, and I think the defense, if I'm correct, that was a drive where you picked them off in the end zone. But
that one got the pick.
Then later in the game, Florida State looked like they were going to go for a fake punt, and it ended up being a delay of game.
Thank God.
you give away your fake and have to punt anyway. So, I mean, it's not good enough for Florida State. Players, coaches, any phase of the game.
I said in the instant reaction, that's the happiest I've ever seen to get or ever been to get a delay of game call, because that fake punt was not going to work. It just had no chance.
Yeah, they were eating up. They knew exactly what Gavin Sawchuk was going to be doing there. But yeah, we won't be grading. We won't grade the linebacker room and coaching and all that kind of stuff. But hey, Jaden got an A on that project there. So shout out to Jaden. Thank you for the $5 bomb from you, my man. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of Hear the Spear. We'll be back with you guys live on Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. So make sure, if you're here with us right now on YouTube, smack the like button down below. I know the season isn't going exactly how you want it to go, but we appreciate y'all engaging with us and seeing the comments in here flying with us. It allows us to bring up some more topics and questions. So deeply appreciate you guys. And if you're new here as well, consider hitting that subscribe button down below as we continue to grow there. But we'll see you guys on Wednesday evening, and you guys better start catching up on your sleep, because we got a late night one at 10:30 between Florida State and Stanford. But we'll see y'all in a few days to preview that game. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's week, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.